Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, your home for all content Lord of the Rings home. Today we've got our second installment in the Ultimate Raid Guide series. We're going to take a deeper dive look at Chapter 2 of the raid. If you aren't aware, these videos are primarily intended for beginners, either people who are new to the game, or maybe their guild is just getting into the raids, or they're just getting into, in this case, Chapter 2. So basically what we're going to cover in this video is we're going to cover the scoring mechanics, how to get max points, what you should be trying to do. We're going to cover some of the just basic kind of gameplay mechanics about the chapter in general. And then we're going to cover difficulty tuning, what difficulty should you be aiming for with your different teams. Then we're going to go through who the best characters are, what the best teams are for this particular chapter. And then we're going to end by going through some footage. I believe I've got some Rivendell footage to showcase some different scenarios, kind of talk you through exactly what my kind of thinking is while I'm going through a run. And this is all sort of as a way to kind of guide you towards getting maximum points, right? This is not going to be a step-by-step guide on how to get 900k points using X particular team. No, this is just giving you the tools you need to kind of make your way to getting max points with your current roster. With that, let's get into the scoring. I'm just going to read it, and then we're going to talk about why certain things are very, very important here. Gain 100 points for every percentage of health lost by the enemy cave troll. Gain 100 points for every critical hit. That's important. Keep that in mind for later. Gain 250 points for defeating an enemy orc. Okay. Gain 15,000 points for toppling the enemy cave troll. That's taking the cave troll from 100% health to 25% health. And then gain 15,000 points when a toppled enemy cave troll loses all health. So it should be very obvious that the goal here is basically to get his health from 100% down to 25%, get him to be toppled, right? And then get that extra 25% down when he's in that toppled state. And that's going to give you maximum points for the chapter. And it is effectively a DPS check, especially while he's toppled, because he can either do one of two things when he's toppled, right? You've got to get 25% health down. If you get all the way down to 0%, he gets up, takes a turn, goes back to 100% health, and that's where you get all the extra points. However, if he takes a turn before that, he just immediately goes back up to 100% health anyway. Let's kind of get into some of the skills that the cave troll uses here. His basic does a lot of damage, inflicts daze, which reduces your focus. That's important because the cave troll's already really hard to land Banes on because he's got pretty high resistance, but when he attacks your character and puts daze on them, then that makes it even harder. So that's something to be aware of. He also gains 1 stack of momentum. I'm going to take some time and explain what momentum is right now. Momentum is a buff that he can basically put on himself and stack on himself, and it gives him plus 2% speed per stack. This is the mechanic, or one of the mechanics, that basically ramp up the encounter and make it so that you aren't, surviving a whole lot longer in the raid. So in that way, it's kind of like the mechanic from Chapter 1, where the orcs have their over here passive that, kind of ramps up their damage. However, I will say in Chapter 2, the time it takes for the cave troll to kind of go from nice to scary is very, very fast. So the ramp time between, this seems like a good run, to, oh no, my run is definitely over, is pretty much like that. And a lot of that has to do with momentum and enrage, which we'll get to in a little bit here. His first ability is a cleanse. It's a deafening roar. While he's not enraged, it just clears 1 bane off of himself, and then he puts 3 counterattack on himself, and he gains 1 stack of momentum. It doubles all stacks of momentum, and that is big, right? Because if you're just at 1 stack of momentum and you double it, then you're just at 2 stacks, and you're at plus 4% speed. That doesn't seem so bad. But if you're at 10 stacks of momentum and you double it, you're suddenly at 20 stacks of momentum, and that is a large increase in speed. So you can kind of get to start to see how it can run away really, really fast if you don't control how many momentum stacks he has. If he's in rage, it doesn't just clear 1 bane, it clears all the banes off of himself. He gains a bunch of turn meter based on how many stacks he has. And then if he has 25 stacks of momentum, he basically gets another turn and then can refresh, his second ability here, which is Pulverize. Pulverize is his second ability here, and it basically inflicts Enfeeble, which makes your character less likely to crit. That's important because crits are what reduce momentum stacks. We're going to kind of tie all this together at the end here, but he's basically putting a debuff on your characters with his basic that makes it so you can't inflict banes, and he also puts a debuff on your characters They basically make it so they can't crit and they can't reduce momentum stacks. He also gains 2 stacks of momentum. That's a big deal. More momentum is bad. If he's enraged, again, he gets turn meter based on how many momentum stacks he has. And then if he's got 25 stacks, gains 100% turn meter, and he gets seismic collapse. Okay, so do you see how if he gets to 25 momentum stacks, he automatically gains 100% turn meter when he does his roar, and then he can pulverize, and because he's still at 25 momentum stacks, he then automatically goes into seismic collapse. So he roars, pulverizes, and then he goes into the seismic collapse ability. And the seismic collapse ability is when you know your run is probably in the danger of being over. Basically, it depends on how many stacks you have, but at 25 stacks, it inflicts stun for 1 turn on all enemy, plus all this other stuff. So it removes turn meter, inflicts slow, and importantly, it removes 1 stamina from enemies' abilities. So you thought you maybe were going to get your rotation in to finish him off, get him toppled again, then he does a seismic collapse. And now suddenly your abilities aren't up anymore. So it's a big deal, especially when he gets to 25. The run's basically over, I would say. Okay, so let's talk about momentum. The way you can reduce momentum is by doing buff removal, like from a character, but also critical strikes. Critical strikes reduce 1 stack of momentum. The other time he loses momentum is when he gets toppled. So you take him from 100% to 25% health. He goes into that toppled state. He loses all of his stacks of momentum. And then also when he does the seismic collapse. I should mention he can only do the seismic collapse when he's enraged, which I'll talk about now. When you initially go into the encounter, the cave troll is not enraged. He only becomes enraged after you've toppled him the first time. That's important because enraged is going to really kind of put a timer, I would say, on your run. And that's because enraged adds plus 2% armor, block chance, damage, and resistance per stack that he has. He gains stacks of enraged every time he gains a stack of momentum, right? So when he becomes enraged, you gain access to seismic collapse, that little rock throw thing. Gain 1 stack of momentum on block or counterattack. So now, anytime he blocks or counterattacks, he's getting momentum, which also then means he gains a stack of enraged. You can lose stacks of momentum, but you cannot lose stacks of enrage. That is a key part to the Chapter 2 encounter. If you don't control the momentum early on, the enraged stacks are going to get out of control and it's not going to matter. Okay, so let's summarize what exactly happens when you first get into Chapter 2. When you first get in there, he's not going to be enraged. He's still going to be building up stacks of momentum through his normal attacks, and then if he roars, it's going to double his momentum. It's going to make him go faster. But that first stage is the nice cave troll, right? You're eventually going to get him down to 25% health. At that point, he's toppled. He's going to summon in 2 orc allies on either side of him. They can be any of the orcs except the bomber. The orcs that you need to worry about are going to be the Skull Crusher, because he's going to apply slow to your whole team. And the other orc you're going to have to worry about is probably the Shadow Seer, because if you are able to apply, let's say, a slow to the cave troll, the Shadow Seer's basic is going to be able to take off that slow, and then you're in a world of hurt. After you either let the cave troll take a turn or you get him to 0% health, he's going to spawn back up, he's going to have 100% health, and now he's going to be able to get enraged. And importantly, he's going to get momentum stacks when he blocks and when he counterattacks. And he's getting counterattack every time he does his roar, right? So there's a little bit of strategy in here that I want to talk about eventually when we move on to sort of individual characters, what characters are good and the teams and whatnot. For now, let's talk about difficulty tuning. I would say that in my estimation, difficulty 3 is tuned to 7 stars. It's different than Chapter 1, where I would say difficulty 3 is tuned more to 5 stars. The reason I'm saying that is because the ability to apply Banes on the cave troll only seems to be more consistent when you're at 7 stars on a character. And that's pretty important for controlling the cave troll in general. And so that's why I'm saying it's probably tuned for 7 stars. Also, the recommended power is 64,000. In difficulty 3 in Chapter 1, it's 55,000, so there's obviously a big bump up. So I would say 7 stars is probably what the cave troll is tuned for in difficulty 3. I would say 5 stars in difficulty 2, and probably 3 stars in difficulty 1. So notice that there is a big jump up, right? Your guild might have gotten 17 million points to advance you to Chapter 2. The Cave Troll is different than Chapter 1. It's much, much harder. Also, just so you know, it's 17 million points to go from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2. It's also 17 million points to go from Chapter 2 to Chapter 3. Just as a kind of note there. But I would say if your team is 40k power, probably even 30k, 38k power or higher, try out difficulty 3. You should be doing difficulty 3 with a team if you can topple the Cave Troll and get his health all the way down to 0. So different teams are going to be better at that than other teams, but that's kind of a rule of thumb for whether a team should be in difficulty 3 or difficulty 2. Let's switch over to characters and teams. Okay, so I've got another infographic here that shows characters that are very good in Chapter 2, as well as the meta teams. On this left column here, I've got something titled Big Banes, and basically the characters in this particular column can apply Banes that I think are very, very effective against Chapter 2 Troll. And most of that, at least these first two columns here, or first two rows rather, are going to be percent health-based attacks. So let me give you an example. Strider and Rockma, they can inflict burn, right? Ekalu and Robel, they can inflict Black Serpent poison. That is basically a special unique buff to the Haradrim that basically takes any sort of buff that the character would have gotten and turns it into a poison. And then we've got bleeds, you know, from Keely, Dunhar, Golbers, the Great Goblin, that sort of thing. The reason percent health-based Banes are so effective in Chapter 2 of the raid is because it doesn't matter what his armor is. You know that a bleed is going to take away 5%. Burns take away 10% health. Bleeds take away 5% health. Poisons take away 3% health. Burns cannot stack. Bleeds and poisons can. And that is why if you can build up a bunch of these percent health-based Banes, you're basically, every time he goes, you're going to be able to chunk him down some amount of health. And it's not going to matter that you can't pierce through his armor and get all your, you know, have all of your damage reduced by the Cave Troll's high armor because his health is getting chunked away by bleeds anyway. Some other people I've included in here are the two characters that can apply Disrupted, Morja and Bolg. Disrupted obviously means that the character can't get any Banes. Similar to Black Serpent Poison in that way. Kind of, Black Serpent Poison is kind of like a small instance, like a stack of Disrupted in a weird way, an adjacent way, right? But Bolg and Morja are the only ones who can apply that right now. It's very, very powerful. And then in this bottom row here, I've included characters that can apply 2-turn slows. Most of the time, that's like the last ability upgrade is adding that second turn of slow duration. But Wubate, Biffer, Lord Elrond, Faramir, and Mauher all can do it. Mauher's actually got a pretty short cooldown on his slow, which is pretty cool. The time you should be using slow is when he's toppled. The reason for that is because you're kind of on the clock. You need to get 25% health down in basically 1 or 2 turns. He goes a little bit slower when he's toppled, but you're not going to have a lot of time. Plus, you're going to have to deal with orcs coming in, right? So if you can apply a slow on him while he's toppled, you've now given yourself a bunch of breathing room to deal with the orcs that have spawned in, do any healing that you need to do, get things off of cooldown that you don't want off cooldown before he gets up again and either becomes enraged or starts, you know, his second enraged moment. And then the characters in the right-hand column here, I just called momentum removal. And that's either because they do a lot of crits. So like Legolas, Lomian, Keely even has some crit stuff built in there. Eowyn I'm including, but her crit leadership is really for assists and counterattacks, which is maybe not as useful as some of these other characters, but I thought I would include it in there anyway. Mauher's a crit machine. Strider's a crit machine. You know, I think Yef2 has some crit built into his kit. And then also people who just remove boons on some of their abilities, like Arwen does that. Biffer does that. And then, you know, I think Pippin does that as well. And Mary has a skill that does that. But Biffer and Pippin, I think, remove on their basic, which is important. Ironhide's got a skill that removes boon. Denethor has a skill that removes boon. The reason I've included Bolg in here is because of his leadership ability, where there's like a 50% chance for you to gain advantage every time Misty Mountain Orc goes. I believe it's Misty Mountain Orc. That's pretty important because it gives a lot of crit potential to your team. Legolas is also really, really good at this. So Lomian and Legolas, I think, are pretty pretty good characters for Chapter 2 of the raid for elves. So let's talk about that. What kind of are the meta teams going into Chapter 2 of the raid? The first team I want to talk about is the first team that I saw get 900k points in difficulty 3 in Chapter 2 of the raid, and that is actually the Isengard team. Not the Haradrim, but the Isengard team. And that's because Isengard just has so many ways to control the cave troll. You've got bleeds from Dunhar and Ajak. You've got exposed from Ajak. You've got disrupted from Morja. Morja can also apply weak-minded. Ugluk can apply weak-minded. Ugluk's got a blind. Ugluk's got a disable. You know, Mauher is a crit machine, right? You can also apply slows. So the Isengard team has a lot of ways to deal with the cave troll. And then most of those are Bane-based, right? And being able to stick those Banes. They've also got 2 characters that help with that, right? Morja can apply weak-minded on his basic, right? If he hits Ugluk, especially if he's provoking, right? Hits him. If Ugluk blocks, he's also going to get weak-minded likely. So even if there's high in rage stacks, there's some ways to kind of deal with that high resistance because of the weak-minded. Really, really solid team for Chapter 2. The next team I'm going to talk about is what I consider to be the best raid team currently, Rivendell Elves. Lomian and Legolas are great options here. I know people love to like run Legolas lead. I haven't found as much success in that. I prefer to run Elrond lead, and I actually think that's one of the keys to why my Elrond team is successful. I've gotten like 800k points with my Elrond team, and it's not a full 7-star team actually. You know, my Elrond is 5 stars. A lot of my other characters are 6 stars. And the reason I think he does well still is because of Elrond's leadership ability, having that extra % damage based on how many boons are on the team. Really, really key for getting that DPS check down. Lomian also crits like crazy. You can sub in Legolas somewhere if you want. I find that works sometimes it doesn't. Road to Rivendell. Another good team for Chapter 2 of the raid. It's very, very high percentage points. We've got a few people in here, right? Strider's a crit machine. He can deal with momentum removal. And then they've got some kind of capabilities to deal with the stacks of momentum. They're also a pretty fast team, so they're able to kind of lap the cave troll, at least at the start. I will say I was kind of hesitant to put them on here. And the reason for that is because I was thinking about putting the dwarves on here. And the reason I didn't put the dwarves on here is because there's still some bugs that are kind of afflicting the dwarves. But I want to point out how good Keely is. Keely has the ability to apply 4 bleeds on the cave troll when he's got momentum stacks, which is 20% damage per tick. And he can do it for 2 turns, right? So the bleeds can stick for 2 turns. That's a huge amount of damage. Not to mention the fact that his passive ability gives him extra crit chance and extra crit damage. And so he's able to do some momentum removal as well. He's also got a disable. He's just got a lot in his kit going for him to deal with the cave troll. I think he's one of the top 5 characters for Chapter 2 of the raid. But I included R2R on here instead because I've seen them do better than dwarves right now. Haradrim, the team that was sold to be the key to Chapter 2. They are very good. They were the second team I saw get 900k points in Chapter 2 on difficulty 3. But where things go wrong for Haradrim is that you need them at high star levels, you need them at high investment, especially their passives. They all have to be maxed out. So it's a very high level investment team, but I'm going to say that Haradrim are actually a very good raid team in general, not just in Chapter 2. So if you're thinking about putting investment in them, or you already have put some investment in them, it's a safe bet to continue to invest in them. Again, it's a cookie cutter team though. There's no theory crafting in terms of team composition. That's kind of one of the downsides, I think, personally, with the Haradrim. That and that you just need to get all their passives to level 6, basically. The last team that I want to talk about are the Goblins. They're an all-around great raid team, but they're very good in Chapter 2. Big reason for that is Golbers. He can just apply bleeds like crazy, but Great Goblin also has a 1-turn slow. He's also got a summon. Just great damage all around. They kind of build off of each other. If there's Banes on a character that Golbers is applying Banes to, let's say they do extra damage. Orfer's also great at doing some crit-related stuff. So they actually have a pretty good setup for getting the cave troll down pretty quickly. And that's one of the keys, is making sure that the cave troll is not building up momentum stacks. And then after he's been toppled, building up in rage stacks too, right? The quicker you get him down, especially after he's been toppled, the better your chances are of getting to a second topple, which is kind of what you need to get to max points. Okay, so now I want to go over some footage. I've got some footage from my live stream of just me using the Rivendell Elves from a little while ago. They're 42k power here. I'm using Lomian, and I'm not using Legolas at all here. And I think I do okay. I get like 500k points. Since then, since I've put a little bit more, kind of levels into my abilities, I've been able to get up in close to 800k points with my Rivendell Elves. Again, they're not even 7-star. They're a really good, great raid team. But some of the things I want to point out here are just, again, controlling the momentum stacks early on so that, when he does his roar, he's not doubling a already large amount of stacks. One of the strategies that I think you should consider using, and I think has been a little bit more effective to me, at least recently, is once he's enraged and he does his roar and he gets his counterattacks going, right, which now give him momentum stacks, it's okay to maybe just let those chill for a second. And that maybe seems counterintuitive, but if he goes again, and he has like his seismic crush up and he goes again and uses that early on when you've under 10 momentum stacks, that's big because it means that's on cooldown. And now you can kind of get to the second topple that you need to get max points, if that makes sense, right? So here I'm just trying to get to that first topple. The first stage is really pretty easy. You kind of are able to gauge whether your team should be in that particular difficulty based on how they're going towards the stage. You'll notice that I'm going to save Elrond's special 2 here because I don't want to slow him just yet. I'm taking my time though. Let's see if we skip ahead here. Yep. Now he's toppled. 2 Manglers. That's a pretty good roll here. We've also got an expose on the cave troll, which means he's going to take a lot of extra damage, so I don't have to worry about things so much. Just going to try and get the ads out of the way because I know I'm also going to try and put a slow on him with Elrond. Slow sticks, that's good. Now I'm going to take care of the ads. Probably should have saved that for when he comes back up. The other piece of advice I have to give you is that as he's coming back up, he has the least amount of stacks of enrage. So that is when you're going to find the most success in being able to land your Banes again, is right at the start. It's a little bit of a tricky situation because he immediately does his roar, right? So none of the Banes you land while he's toppled are going to stick because he does his roar. And therefore he gets counterattack and he's going to build momentum stacks, but he has the lowest stacks of enrage. So it's kind of this weird catch-22 where you want to attack him and put Banes on him right away, but then you also want to make sure that he's not building up momentum stacks. So your team needs to kind of have some tools to deal with that, I would say. Let me skip past me doing stalling for a large amount of time. We're just doing a basic here. There we go. Now he's enraged. He roars. He immediately gets 3 stacks of enrage. He's got counterattack as well. I don't think I should actually have hit him there. I think I should have just probably healed with Elrond, actually. I used Arwen's special 1 just because I wanted to either remove counterattack or I wanted to remove momentum. I think that's a good thing to do right after he comes up. One of the big issues is that your characters stop critting and they start just getting blocked. So even when you are trying to kind of reduce momentum stacks, you end up adding to more momentum stacks, right? Elrahir's Retaliate is really, really good here. So one kind of initial setup that I want to talk about with Isengard here while we watch them try and get to the second topple is that what you can do is don't blind your first turn with Ugluk. Instead, just do a basic attack, and then when Morja goes, do the special ability that gives everybody haste or some amount of people haste. If you get haste on Ugluk, that's good because when Mauher goes, you can do his slow. So now you've got a slow applied on the cave troll. You've got haste on Ugluk. Ugluk's going to end up going before the cave troll again, in which case you can use Ugluk's special 2. You can disable the cave troll, make sure he doesn't roar, right? That's big because then you kind of on the next rotation, you're going to be able to put Disrupted with Morja. It's not that big of a deal because it's sort of it's before he's enraged, so he's not ramping like crazy, but It's kind of a fun little setup. It gets you there to that first topple a lot faster, I would say. You can notice now that, you know, my Rivendell elves basically got hosed because he did the seismic. He threw rocks at us, right? He did a seismic crush, takes out 2 of my characters. Elrond's Unbreakables are actually really, really important in this particular chapter. The Nimbles from the elves are also really, really important. Gonna use the heal, get people back up. Just trying to get that last little bit to get to 25%, get him toppled a second time. Although I really doubt I'm gonna be able to get him all the way back down to 0% here, but that's okay. If I could hit the slow here, then I think we would be golden. But he's got 53 stacks of Enrage, so he's got like over plus 100% resistance. So it's kind of useless. This is kind of where the run ends. But I'm showing you this for a number of reasons. One, it's a pretty fast chapter, right? He gets enraged pretty quickly. Like I've been saying the whole video, he sort of ramps up very, very quickly. And so you have to be able to control those momentum stacks. 53 Enrage is not good. That's a lot of momentum stacks that he was able to get. So let's summarize some of the key points for Chapter 2 of the raid. First and foremost, the probably most important thing you want to consider when going into Chapter 2 is having people on your team that can apply % health-based Banes. Burns, bleeds, poisons. Those are really, really good against the Cave Troll. Why? Because they do a set amount of damage, and they ignore the Cave Troll's high armor. They don't care about his armor, right? It's basically like cardboard armor to them. Doesn't matter. Those are really, really important. Second big key takeaway is that you need a way to control momentum stacks. And that can either come from crits, or it can come from just boon removal. So I showed you Rivendell elves. They don't have a lot of % based Bane effects, but they do have crits in spades, and they've got some boon removal. Lomine is a crit machine, right? His special 1 hits 5 times. If it crits all 5 times, that's 5 stacks of momentum removed. Massive, right? Arwen's able to remove boons with her special 1. Eladin passes out deadly. If it goes on Elra here, let's say, anytime somebody attacks Eladin, the cave troll, Elra here is going to retaliate, right? If he crits on his retaliate, that's also going to reduce momentum stacks. Third big key takeaway. Save your slows for when the cave troll is toppled. That way you give yourself a bunch of breathing room for dealing with the orcs that spawn in, but also making sure that you are set up and ready to go for when he comes out of toppled and is enraged for the first time or enraged for that second time. The last takeaway I'll leave you with here is that there's this decision you have to make when the cave troll pops back up from being toppled. It's when he's most vulnerable at that moment to Banes, right? For the rest of the run, he's going to be more resistant to Banes. He's also going to have counterattack, which means that he's going to start stacking up momentum when you attack him and land those Banes. So if you've got a % health-based run team, right? Maybe it's best to stack up all of your Banes right at the start when he comes back up. That's probably a good time to do it. So anytime I play with like Strider, I'm saving his second burn, first burn for the first phase. I'm saving his second burn for when he pops back up, immediately applying burn because I know it's likely to stick then as opposed to later. But if you've got a team like Rivendell Elves that don't apply a lot of Banes, it's okay to maybe just take a second and wait. You don't have to just go right into the counterattack. You don't have to wait for him to get all those momentum stacks built up. And the reason for that is because you want to make sure that you're getting, you know, below 10 momentum stacks, ideally when he does his rock throwing, his seismic crush or whatever. That way you basically just get, I think it's just slowed at 10 stacks or below, maybe it's not even anything. You want to avoid that 25 stacks and because that's basically the run killer. Okay, that was a lot of information. But like I said at the beginning of the video, this is not a step-by-step, guide on how to get one particular team to 900k points. This is simply the tips and tools you need to use, and including the characters and teams you should maybe think about using to get maximum points in Chapter 2 of the raid. I'm going to leave a lot of this kind of puzzle solving and strategy to you because I think that's where a lot of the fun is. I also don't think that's just kind of the point of one of these types of videos. I'm kind of acting as a guided light pathway as opposed to giving you, a recipe or whatever. But thanks for watching. Take it easy.